The government's considering a crackdown on hooligans who caused trouble at public protests in the wake of the violence which marred the huge union-led demonstration on Saturday. Home Secretary Theresa May raised the prospect of new powers to ban known hooligans from attending rallies, marches, even forcing people to remove their balaclavas or face scarves. But is it futile to expect that protests of this nature can really be peaceful again? Paul Mason was there.
It was a massive, peaceful demonstration. Up to 500,000 people, nurses, bin men, teachers and their pupils.
This is fantastic today, and we need to take it on from there. We need to have not just us out on strike next week, but all the workers out on strike.
But it's the violence of a few that's grabbed the headlines, to the shock of many who marched peacefully, and it now looks set to provoke new stop and search powers for the police. With a team of Newsnight video journalists, I was present on both halves of what happened on Saturday. What I saw raises questions for the avowedly non-violent anti-cuts movement UK Uncut and the police. Shortly before 2 o'clock, a large group of masked protesters, many carrying anarchist flags, appeared on London's Regent Street. This is the so-called Black Bloc, in bigger numbers than ever seen on the streets of Britain before. This is not a breakaway from the march because these people were not on the march, but they now most definitely are storming through London's West End. As we followed them, it became clear their targets were specific businesses and the police. London's main shopping street was already dotted with peaceful protests organised by the UK Uncut group. But as the Black Bloc turned up, they merged with a wider group of protesters. The police, even the riot squad, repeatedly on the back foot. Later, protesters in masks targeted the Ritz Hotel, Porsche showrooms, Topshop and other businesses. The police, as here, often in too small numbers to stop the damage to property. What some of the businesses are worried about is that a policy's been adopted of we'll take their photograph, we'll arrest them later, but meanwhile your property's just going to be damaged. Is that the Met's policy?
That is absolutely not the policy. What you saw this weekend, this Saturday, it was more arrests at this public order incident than there's been for at least 5 years. We gave officers a very clear instruction: if you see something, do something. And the fact that 31 of them were injured shows that they do, and I pay huge credit to them.
But who are the Black Bloc? The old answer to that was a small group of experienced, hardcore anarchists with little or no overlap to the so-called fluffy end of the non-violent protest movement. More than one source today within that movement has told me this is no longer true.
And Laurie
Penny is a campaigning journalist who's taken part in the protest.
Black Bloc aren't a group of people or an organisation, it's a tactic. And the people involved in Black Bloc on Saturday came from all kinds of walks of life. Most of them were young. A lot of them hadn't been on that kind of protest before. You know, a lot of people involved in the Black Bloc on Saturday, many of them 6 months ago were members of the Labour Party, working for the Liberal Democrat Party, people who really believed back then that parliamentary democracy could work for them. And now they believe that it's not going to work for them.
At 4 o'clock, UK Uncut staged its main action, an occupation of Fortnum and Masons. If the police had been slow to make arrests before, they were not now. Out! Of 149 people charged on Saturday, 138 were arrested here.
What worries me is that given the way that UK Uncut are now being targeted by the police and the press, ordinary people who have in the past gone to join this movement might think that now they can't. Now it's a radical militant group which has nothing to do with their lives. But actually that kind of resistance still has everything to do with ordinary people's lives.
The police this afternoon rejected any suggestion they were politically targeting UK Uncut.
We have statements and CCTV evidence of certainly very frightening behaviour for the people who were in that shop, going about business as usual, trying to have lunch with their children when a group of people burst in the doors and frightened them. That was not acceptable, and that's why they've been arrested.
Tonight, new footage emerged via the Guardian newspaper, which shows this chief inspector inside the shop telling legal observers the protesters would not be arrested because they had been non-violent.
Right. OK, so the plan understanding is that people just let go now, that the breach of the peace, possible breach of the peace was outside, and that's been dealt with.
That's been dealt with. That's why everyone was kept in here.
Yeah.
Was so that they didn't get, not that they didn't get involved, but they didn't get wrapped up and involved in there, because we don't want, people are here, non-violent, it's sensible, etc., etc. We don't want them getting involved in stuff that is, makes it difficult for them. So
asked for comment, the police said the matter is sub judice. As for the union movement, many of those who marched and stood for hours from all parts of the UK were fuming at the lack of attention their issues are getting. Up to now, the unions and the peaceful direct action groups have seen themselves as two wings of the same movement. But today, many union members are outraged at the scale of violence and destruction. Meanwhile, the radical blogosphere is alive with recrimination over what many see as a spectacular own goal. And with the black bloc growing, the policing methods to contain it may need to evolve some more.
Paul Mason there. With me now is Lucy Anson, a spokesperson for UK Uncut. Thanks for coming in, Lucy.
Thanks for having me.
Just talk us through your position on the kind of violence at Saturday's march. It's noticeable you haven't condemned it, do you?
Well, we are a group we are a network of people who are growing. We're a group of people who self-organise. We don't have a position on things. What we do is share resources to be able to plan actions against the cuts, and it's very much about empowering the individual to go out there and be creative and take civil disobedience.
OK, well, when the individual's empowered, does he attack buildings, and does he think it's wrong if other people attack buildings? That's what I'm asking.
You might have to ask that particular individual. I mean, certainly.
Well, what do you think? You're a spokesperson for UK Uncut. What do you think?
Well, I'm a spokesperson for myself. I've never been involved in an action where there's been any property damage. I like creativity. I like using art as my form of protest, which is why UK
Uncut's
very much for me.
window creative? Is it art? Is it? I mean, do you think that's a good
My
way to protest?
interpretation is that no, I wouldn't choose to smash a window, but that's actually my decision. And in terms of UK Uncut, we create alternative spaces. We have spaces inside banks where we've turned them into libraries, into forests, into creches. We have children and pensioners attending our actions.
Do you think your
really
children, your
places
pensioners and the unions that support you would quite like to hear you condemn the violence? I mean, it can't be that hard, can it?
I think in many ways, I think there's an oversimplification. There's a sort of a pantomime auditorium ongoing at the moment. Condemn or condone, condemn or condone. Well, actually, what we want to talk about is the
throwing things
issues.
at an officer, or somebody's throwing things at people in the crowd, or somebody's smashing a bank's window or a shop's window, or whatever. Is that a good thing, or isn't it? It's not a pantomime question I'm asking here. Is it a bad thing to do?
It is an simplification of what happens at a demonstration. A demonstration is a space where many things are in flux. There are many people with different opinions and different tactics. UK Uncut provides spaces which are creative and fun and inclusive.
OK. So if people infer from what you're saying that you're not an entirely peaceful organisation, that would be pretty fair, right?
I don't think that would be fair to say. I don't think anyone's in a position to make an assessment other than the people involved in the actions themselves.
You don't want to condemn the violence?
I don't think that's a fair question to ask, and I'm going to reject the premise of that question.
Are you worried that black bloc people will use UK Uncut, become UK Uncut? You become this conduit for, essentially full-on anarchists.
I think there's probably conversations to have amongst all people involved in the anti-cuts movement. This is a very young anti-cuts movement. It's germinating at the moment. We have, for the first time, a huge display of spectacular unity in the Trade Union Congress March. Trade unionists, ordinary people marching more than a quarter of a million people. It was absolutely inspiring.
But your Twitter hashtag could be "We don't really mind," couldn't it? We don't really mind if you join us, if you infiltrate us, if you throw things, if you smash windows. Anything goes, right?
Is that a tweet that's gone out from the
account?
No,
I'm just interested. I mean, I'm trying. That was how you began, of course. As a sort of collective mass on Twitter.
As an idea, as a piece of inspiration that you can do something about the cuts, and that's what civil disobedience is. I mean, I, for the first time, got involved in direct action just before Christmas. I'd never put myself in the way of anything before, and I found it to be a really empowering experience. For such a long time, we've been so scared about what these cuts are, and now there is something we can do.
But what I'm trying to work out is, why is it more empowering than just joining a solid march of 250,000 people who are all pretty much saying the same thing?
Well, I think that's actually incorrect. People aren't always saying the same thing in a march of people. I did join the march. We had a block on the march, and UK Uncut were really proud to be part of the trade union march on the Saturday. It was absolutely fantastic to march together, and we moved away rather than go for the rally. Yeah, that's right. And we moved away. Rather than go to the rally in Hyde Park, we then went off into Oxford Street to hold these creative occupations where we turned Boots into an NHS hospital to campaign against the cuts. We had a comedy venue.
All right, well,
in
just
Soho
tell me, will you
Square.
change anything? You've had a lot of arrests, you've taken over Fortnum's, all the rest of it's graffiti on the wall. Is anything going to change in your tactics, or was that kind of as planned?
Right now we're very interested in looking at the police tactics, and we're very disturbed by the filming that we saw of police lying to protesters, saying, actually, no, you're not going to be arrested, you're not going to be kettled. And that figure of 200 people who are causing trouble needs
I know
to
the
be
Met's
reduced.
denying that was political, but just got to get that in before we end. Thank you very much
It's definitely a political situation, and we'll be taking legal advice about wrongful arrest.
Lucy Anson, thank you very much for coming in, appreciate that.